Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable. The coders immediately invented this thing and started talking about how it was going to replace poets and it was going to make art and it was going to do all of these, all of which is just ludicrously bad at, and for reasons that seem structural, like that are totally baked into this. This is a pattern recognition software. It's a predictive text souped up times a gajillion. So for all sorts of reasons, you can imagine it doing very badly at art. But it's like, isn't the most obvious application of this technology to offload a bunch of the kind of work that coders already do? Like it's all math
Yeah.
and coding. That said, there's other stuff too in the white collar universe that has that quality. And to me, the most uncomfortable dimension of this conversation is that we are already swimming in work product that might as well have been produced by a machine. All of it created by email job holders. Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast here at the American Mind. I'm your host, and I'm actually not Spencer Clavin, but the AI-trained agent that Spencer has delegated to host this podcast. Bet you can't even tell the difference. He's off being associate editor at the Claremont Review of Books, and I am joined by a whole gang. A whole crowd. It's a merry day today because, first of all, I have to announce with great fanfare that we roped him back in just when he thought he was out of this sordid business. Matt Peterson, OG host of the Roundtable, for people who have been listening since the show's start, is now editor-in-chief at The Blaze, but he is also a Washington Fellow here at Claremont at our DC-based center as of very recently, and part of that means he's going to be back on the podcast from time to time. Matt, welcome home.
It is good to be here. It's just like old times. Just walk in, look at the faces.
Uh-huh.
All that's missing is a whiskey right now in my hand.
You want to go where everybody knows your name. I don't actually know how that song goes because I was never a Cheers guy, but that's the vibe. Awesome. Welcome back, Matt. I am joined also by managing editor Mike Sabo, publisher and president Ryan Williams, and just to add to the fun, Seth Barron, our regular guest here on the show. And we've got kind of a summary. I don't know why. I'm not exactly sure why this slate of topics feels like a start of summer kind of slate to me, but that's how it feels. Those are the vibes, as they say. And I guess we'll find out as we go why exactly that is. But first of all, I kind of teased this at the opening. We wanted to talk a little bit about AI. We try not on the Roundtable to just chase after every trending topic and just talk about what everyone else is talking about, try to get you some stuff that's a little bit more off the beaten track. But every now and then something just swims suddenly into the conversation, and we like to talk about why it might be that that's happening. And in this one in particular has some interesting political implications that I hope we'll get into talking about. And that is AI and the coming white collar apocalypse. Obviously, this is a topic that's been very much in the news in any number of ways. But I think the proximate cause of this latest spate of discussions around it is from a profile/interview in Axios with Dario Amodei. He's the CEO of Anthropic, which is the company that makes Claude. If you're keeping up at home with all the different chatbots, I sort of think of them now as like RPG characters or Pokemon trainers, that they've got the company and then the company opens their little Pokeball and they've got the weird AI monster that they're making. So Anthropic is the one that makes Claude. And he gives this interview at Axios predicting this white collar jobs apocalypse. This sets him apart from his previous colleague, I think his previous boss, Sam Altman of OpenAI, who, when he opens his Pokeball, he's got ChatGPT. So that's the one that's most famous, most in the news. Altman has this sort of sunny, chipper outlook that this stuff is going to be great. You're going to have your little robot assistant. It's going to maximize your productivity and it's going to turbocharge the economy. We're going on a rocket to the moon. Amade says, no, actually, there's going to be a ton of turbulence on that rocket. And one of the areas hardest hit is going to be this entry level white collar job market. So we're talking here about the guys at law firms who do document review. If you're doing a case at a firm, you would typically get one of your low level, entry level 20 something grunts to go and read all the docs and summarize them for you. That's going to be done by AI now, says Amade. The sorts of things that maybe a lot of us on this podcast did in our 20s, like writing copy. I used to write listicles all the time for PJ Media back when that was a thing. That's the sort of thing I can imagine will now be done in this vision of the future by AI. And so all these CEOs are kind of racing to incorporate AI into their business model. All these AI companies that work with these large language models and deep learning are trying to create what's called agents. So if a chatbot is something that you just like prod and talk to, an agent would be something that has agency that you can just set running independently and tell it to go do this or that task kind of automatically, cheaply, quickly, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a lot of thoughts about this topic in a whole bunch of different directions, but I think I'd like to kick it off just by asking you guys, first of all, to what extent is this real and should we be thinking about it? To what extent is this just hype that has been created out of a media cycle for Axios and Anthropic? But to the extent that it is real, will there be political implications to this? Are we about to see a strange new respect for populism among the demoted elites who are about to get shunted out of these white collar jobs, or is something else entirely going to happen? Discuss.
My first thought is this is not the first time we've had some thoroughly disrupting technology displacing jobs. I guess the annoying libertarians, and it's not all of them, but you know who you are, or others know who you are. Will say, "Oh, this is just another version of the horse and buggy conundrum. You know, horses became obsolete with carriage drivers as well. They were displaced." That seems like a pretty discrete and narrow example when compared to something that seems much more all encompassing, at least for a certain segment of types of jobs. So the question is, what is the transition period? Is it going to look like other transition periods? And is the result going to be ultimately more jobs, higher productivity? Well, I think higher productivity goes without saying for a certain class of work. And what will it mean for the broader economy? I think the economic effects seem to be good in the aggregate. The question is who gets displaced and who gets displaced permanently if such a thing is going to happen. So, to the extent that the types of job that AI displaces are kind of mid-level, mid-wit, higher IQ sort of stuff, the question becomes more actually not even the white collar apocalypse. That will probably lead to some period of transition and adaptation with those sorts of workers into something else, maybe watching over AI or managing it or whatever.
Pokemon trainer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. The Pokemon trainers. The question is, maybe it takes a lot less of them than needed to do the work. I remember, I think we talked on this podcast 2 or 3 years ago, even that as you mentioned, Spencer, document review for lawyers, financial filings for regulatory stuff. I think I remember talking to someone a few years back or 2 years back, who's at the cutting edge of this, saying it basically took document review and SEC filings and that sort of thing. It took something like a 40-hour-a-week job and compressed it into a couple minutes. So, and then there's the broader question of all these service jobs that have already been replaced or are being replaced and have been for the last 5 to 7, 10 years. Everyone who goes to a McDonald's knows that the footprint of the staff is a lot less. They're still cooking in the back, but half the ordering is done by app or on a computer screen at the locale. So we'll see. I thought that we traded around this Axios piece that you mentioned, Spencer, and I thought the most absurd claim, and it's embedded in this list from the interviewee, was cancer is cured, the economy grows at 10% a year, the budget is balanced and 20% of people don't have jobs. I think all of those things might be true, except the budget is balanced. I mean, has anyone looked at Congress? I think that's probably too high a hill to climb, even for the AI revolution.
That
And
sounds like nothing so much as Marx and Engels in the German ideology talking about how under communism you will wake up and go
yeah,
farming in the morning and fishing, which is the quote that keeps coming back every time I talk about this
yeah,
topic. Is like we're all going to do philosophy in the afternoon, have
yeah,
fully automated luxury communism.
that's right. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. I have another thing to drop towards the end of this segment, but I'll save the fun for later.
Okay.
At the same time, weirdly enough, McDonald's has pledged to hire 400,000 employees this summer. I don't really know why. I mean, I guess they're planning on opening another 900 restaurants. But even then, that would be like 400 employees per restaurant. That seems a little, I don't really know what they're doing. I mean, unless this is something that Trump has convinced them to do just to kind of make it sound like it's morning in America again. The funny thing about the coming AI cataclysm is that I've been hearing about it for a few years, but mostly from people who do coding, right? Because, and it seems like it's one of those things, at least initially it seemed to me, that this is something that will mostly, like, it was, people in computers seemed very concerned about it because this is all about computers. So
That's not a good solid backup,
Learn to
Jonathan.
prompt. Learn to
Exactly.
prompt.
learn to prompt, right? Exactly. I don't know. So for a while, I was thinking, oh, this is just all overblown, and like people who are like, obsessed with computing and coding and all of that are maybe a little hysterical. I mean, at the same time, it does seem like it's a problem. I mean, do you guys have like PDoom scores that
I don't
you've
even know what
come
that
up with?
is.
Me neither. No idea.
P hyphen doom close
Oh, like likelihood of doom.
close
Right. Okay.
paren.
Sorry.
Yes. What is the likelihood of doom based on AI? And like all the tech people have their P doom scores. I guess it averages around 10 or 20%. That guy that you were mentioning, what's his name? Dario Amodei, I guess his is between 10 and 25. I mean, until recently I was thinking, 0. But I don't know. I mean, I guess if AI becomes completely, as far as I can tell, AI already passes the Turing test. You can't really tell if you're talking to a person or not.
So it depends on the context and what you do with it and et cetera. But yeah, it can. I mean, which is to me one more indicator of why the Turing test is so fundamentally flawed as a test for machine intelligence. But like, there is this funny thing where the the coders, like, I got some flack for saying this on Twitter, but it is kind of true. The coders immediately invented this thing and started talking about how it was going to replace poets and it was going to make art and it was going to do all of these, all of which is just ludicrously bad at, and for reasons that seem structural, like that are totally baked into this. This is a pattern recognition software. It's a predictive text souped up times of a gajillion. So for all sorts of reasons, you can imagine it doing very badly at art. But it's like, isn't the most obvious application of this technology to offload a bunch of the kind of work that coders already do? Like it's all math
Yeah.
and coding. That said, there's other stuff too in the white collar universe that has that quality. And to me, the most uncomfortable dimension of this conversation is that we are already swimming in work product that might as well have been produced by a machine. All of it created by email job holders. Like the emails that show up in my inbox advertising the latest, like the publicity emails advertising the latest book, and the book itself that probably didn't need to get written. And there's just a ton, like our economy, partially as a response to the prior gutting of our manufacturing sector, is already structured around make work bullshit jobs. So they did sort of set up a lot of jobs, to tee up a lot of jobs to get obliterated by a machine that can do them. And now you're hearing about it because this people that write the think pieces and the articles are suddenly like adjacent to the industries whose roles are being mechanized away, as compared to when we were putting robots in the factories or outsourcing to China. So there's a little bit of a world's smallest violin quality to all of this, and a sense that the true innovators and creators will always know how to, or figure out how to use the latest tools in innovative and creative and interesting ways. But there is a ton of like, kind of uncashable checks that we've written to people that you just get to kind of like do these menial email jobs forever, and that's was kind of an unsustainable house of cards anyway, and this is sort of just like the wrecking ball that's coming for it. That's maybe my doomerist take.
And I think that's a really good point because, I mean, the divide is obviously white collar jobs. I mean, the same people who told us learn to code, their own job might be gone. And what are we going to rely on more? I mean, blue collar jobs, people who actually do things with their hands. So that could be coming back in a big way. Trade schools, that kind of thing. We could see, big shift in colleges. I mean, I'm kind of the mindset, just like when automation kind of started coming, they're going to take all our jobs. Okay, this is overblown. But, in that same Axios piece, and Steve Bannon's been talking about this for a while. I mean, he said this is going to be just a huge, huge shift. You have people kind of across the ideological spectrum saying this. You have CEOs. They talked about this in this piece. Every single one of them is working furiously to figure out when and how agents or other AI tech can displace human workers at scale. I don't doubt that. So I think there could be a big revolution. I think, as usual, Congress is probably 20, 30 years behind. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I'm usually skeptical of these things, but there could be really something here that could really shift the ground. And then too, time wise, I mean, it sounds like it could be 5 years. It maybe could be 2026. We'll see.
And whenever the unemployment rate is hardest hit, if there is a dip coming, it matters who's president at the time. It's not necessarily a presidential thing, although you can influence it. But
and that would be huge for the midterms too, for Trump and for congressional Republicans. I mean, the Senate I think looks still pretty good. That the House could go either way, but yeah, that would definitely take a toll on Trump for sure. I mean, just historically, you look at what happens to the president's party, 2 years later. So that could hurt him depending on what happens. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, first the Turing test. I agree with Spencer; it's always been unsatisfactory, but it does work if a AI can convince you that it is an e-girl. I think the e-girl test, it passes pretty well. Looking around the internet. The other thing is that I knew something was going on when my now 14-year-old and his friends would call someone a bot. Bro, just stop being a bot. And 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 this is also why James Polis of American Mind Memory would talk about how the wokeness could be easily enforced through AI. So that's already with us. But I guess the trajectory of this was the big talk 10 years ago was how all the blue collar jobs were going to get replaced, and everyone, white collar people, love to talk about that and how that'd be a big problem. And as you guys are saying, then all of a sudden now it's getting very uncomfortable for anyone who's writing. And they realize that actually this is coming for them. So, Mark Andreessen, I think he once tweeted, overheard in DC, regulating AI is the PMC, the professional managerial classes moat, to protect their jobs. And certainly there's a lot of truth to that. And so I think, it is coming, but just to give you an example, like at Blaze, right? There was a time when anything AI was banned, and then, that policy was sort of reversed. And now, I've used it. My managing editor has used it to help people figure out how to write the beginning of an article. Because I'll reveal a trade secret. You actually don't want to put all the information at the top. You do want to bury the lead, because that's the only way people read it. Often.
Thank you. If you can get an editor to allow you to do that, yes, that's a great luxury.
Well, I am a very bad editor, admitting that we actually teach them this now, and AI can be very helpful for that. We don't want people using it, wholesale, but using it to get ideas, using it to change the structure of what they're writing is actually allowed now under the new dispensation for everyone who works for me. Then look at the new hires, the guys coming in that would normally do the kinds of things you were talking about, Spencer, doing the low level writing and listicles. Both of them are very smart. One has an advanced degree, and they both are encouraged to use AI. But I think what's happening is they have to be smart. They have to be very, very good because we want a lot more out of them. And these are like starter jobs for these two guys. I mean, one has had one or two jobs before, but in this kind of related space. But these guys are starting at a very high level. And I think that's made easier by the fact that, AI is coming for the sort of listicle and whatever, but you need people who can use it well and do the research behind the scenes. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Check it for hallucinations and understand what hallucinations are and all that stuff.
yes. Well, think about also, like, I mean, I remember being on this podcast. Gosh, this must be the first time in 3 years. I mean, it's been a while, but talking about the functional illiteracy of many Americans growing. I don't see that ending. I mean, I think this is going to, functional illiteracy is going to become the norm. It already is the norm, especially post COVID in the schools. So but then on the other end of it, you're going to have people who benefit or are rewarded for actually, having a real liberal arts education or really being able to think. And so, I see that divide increasing, and I don't think there's any way that you can say it will just be, low level jobs anymore, and that's what's freaking everyone out.
This is a dimension of it. I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because I know this is dear to your heart, and it's been the thing that I keep circling back to. You mentioned the Blazes policy. I did an interview with Glenn Beck where I had written some piece about how to interact with Grok because I was learning to use these tools and really getting a lot out of them. And I sort of teased this last episode talking about how delighted I am at the AI image identifier on my iPhone that just downloaded. And now it can just suck all the information off of like a card, an invitation, and put it straight into your calendar, that sort of thing. And I was saying how difficult it is to walk the edge between like a kind of reactionary doomerist or like a horror. People have like a natural aversion or horror to this stuff versus the hype enthusiasm. And I was really interested to find kind of on air as Beck was talking about this that he's using AI and his team is using AI and that they're thinking really like seriously and actively about what things can and can't do and how to use it well and not. And so then you really do, once you start wading into those waters, you arrive at these really foundational and eternal questions that have seemed kind of cringe or lame for a while to ask or think about, very out of fashion to say, like, okay, what are the things that only humans can do? What are the things that even if a machine could do them, you would still want to do them for yourself? And you run up very quickly against these tweets that are like, yeah, I saved all this time by summarizing the Brothers Karamazov, so I didn't have to spend those hours reading it. I can just drink my coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I see. What you actually want to preserve time and space for is zeroing out your inner life so that you can effectively live the life of a drooling farm animal. And you suddenly like come up on these questions of leisure, right? How do we let's imagine now that we do end up in the fully automated luxury communism world that Marx envisioned. And actually, it's capitalist innovation that creates it for us. And suddenly we have this tech that takes all the menial labor off our hands. Suddenly you're going to be asked, like, do you want to behave like a 19th century German bourgeois gentleman, essentially, and go farm and read philosophy and criticize? Or do you want to stare drooling at cat videos? And so many people are already in the position where all they can think to do with their free time is like rub a banana peel on their face for 10 minutes because that's their morning routine. Not making that up. That like, they can't think what to do with this AI. And that is, I think, what's like making them doomerists is that nobody's told them like, yeah, there are things that are appropriate to do when you don't have to do anything. There are certain things that are worth doing in and of themselves because they are humanizing and bring you joy. And they're called the liberal arts. And like, this is kind of, I feel like that's going to come back into fashion.
Yeah, I mean, your lips to God's ears. I think though, I think that's already happening, and in very interesting ways. I was at a dinner fundraiser for a magazine, and there were a bunch of younger, as in non-boomer, types there, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they were all just, I just want to sit around and read Homer's Odyssey with someone, like kind of sort of starved for higher order mental stuff, the stuff you do to be human. And I think you see it with the body already, right? We already got to the point where we didn't have to do manual labor, or most people don't. So then the question is, are you just going to get fat or not? What are you going to do? And how do you work that into your life when society hasn't really worked it in for you. So, I mean, I've always been against the doomerism in the sense that, like, great, if machines can do lower order stuff, then there's plenty of higher order stuff we can do. We just have to know how to be human. There's amazing things we can do. So I'm all about the accelerationists, and I don't certainly want government taking it over completely and having a regulation, because you will lead to the communist siren song. That will happen. We just talked about that in our show at Blaze, the show The Mandate. But that's a possibility. But at the same time, I think life is a little more complicated than that, and there'll be hopefully competing AIs, and then throw on top of all this. This is why I guess it's so hard to wrap your mind around it. This is like nuclear technology. I mean, that's the level it's at. So there's going to be some regulation no matter what, because whoever has the strongest AI is going to rule the world. So you see this. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about this. You see this debate where Sachs push AI can only be regulated by the feds, not states. And David Sachs is a smart guy. He's in there. You were right about Congress being behind, but some of these guys are way ahead, and I almost want to slow them down. Like, wait a minute, we do even that issue, like federal or state regulation. I'm like,
Right.
I don't necessarily have a knee jerk reaction to that. I kind of want to have that discussion. As the American people have that discussion yet? That's something we need to talk about. And there's just a host of issues like that.
One funny thing, it was only a few years ago that it was constantly repeated that there are 3.5 million people who work as drivers in America. And by this point, they would all be unemployed. Like, this was the assumption. And everybody talked about it. You can go back and look it up. Like 5-10 years ago, everyone was saying that within just a few years, 3.5 million supposedly low-skilled, mostly men, will be out of work. And we're going to have to figure out what to do for them or with them. Well, self-driving cars may yet become like, a big thing and take over the economy. You never really hear anybody talking about it anymore. So I'm not saying that the threat of AI is necessarily overblown, but just that, I don't know, a lot of these predictions sometimes seem to not really pan out.
Well, there is a breathlessness to the way that technologists speak about their products that goes right up my spine, I have to confess.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
This is what it is. It's like, you can't ever just get out of them, I've built this tool and it can do this thing. It has to be like, it's conscious. It's God. It's going to erase humanity, right? Like, it's like everything is a Black Mirror episode. And what Matt is saying, I think, is, in fact, that's completely distracting from what are ultimately going to be much more globally consequential questions that will have the shape of some of our previous conversations about integrating new technology. And there'll be people that want to regulate it. There will be people that want to like maximize it. And in between, there will be, I don't know, like, imagine Republican deliberation, small r, about like how we might incorporate this into our polity without also completely sacrificing our humanity on the altars of efficiency and compliance. So yeah, I mean,
even with, robots designing to do useful household tasks, and I don't think you can argue that there'd be anything bad about that in and of itself, but it's almost impossible to get robots to make a bed.
Well, right. And
they can't do it. It's too complicated. There's too many parameters. There's too many things that have to be tweaked. I mean, maybe they will eventually.
Well, when you say this, you're always told like this is embryonic and it's going to be a million X in 10 years. And like, maybe, but the driverless cars thing is a good example. Or like, how long did it take before the Roomba didn't behave like a dim-witted child walking into a wall, right? Like there is sort of there. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to get
I mean, doesn't a Roomba only work if you already keep your house very neat?
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
I couldn't have a Roomba. Like, there's just stuff all over the floor.
Right.
Like, it wouldn't
in the house who cleans up for the housekeeper.
Yeah, right.
Just real quick on this, it's true that the robots can't make a bed yet, but what they can do, and I'm having them write an article about this, is they can already. This is humankind. They can't make a bed for us yet, but you can put a picture of your coworker into the computer and then see them, 3D naked and have them do whatever sexual act you want. That's possible already. So So I'm almost like, I think you guys are right. Like, who knows? We don't, some of these things will pan out, some won't. But it's more like the kind of social ramifications. You know what I mean? Like that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thinking. That's pretty interesting to me now, and it's hard, but it's hard to wrap my mind around where exactly this goes. But I mean, that's a great example. Or I just talked to another guy the other day who said, "Do you think that basically any visual images, they're all just going to go into the Borg, right? They're all sucked into AI. So you can already see it with the movies that are coming out, these videos, where is nothing sacred? No, it isn't. Like all visual images will just be thrown into the big communal pot to use. I mean, that's earth shattering stuff, you know. I mean, so
I
that
have a
alone is
yeah.
crazy.
I have a thought about visual realism too. We're already way over time on this topic, and I feel like we could do the whole hour about it. Have you noticed, Matt, though, that the benchmark we use to evaluate the realism of AI generated imagery is CGI generated imagery, or or CGI, basically? That like we've already been trained in a form of realism that is keyed or pegged to computer output product. And if you go back and you watch like Lawrence of Arabia, you realize it looks nothing like even what AI is moving toward, because there's a whole artistic sensibility behind it and a style that's being imposed. Anyway, this is just to say, like, yeah, I think there is a certain kind of visual art that is about to get totally one-shotted by this, but that might also mean that in the same way that kind of quirky and idiosyncratic uses of language come back. Anyway, I should stop making this point anyway because we got to move on.
Wait, I'm glad we brought up Black Mirror, because I just want to flag for everyone this Wall Street Journal write up, which is building off stuff that was reported across this world. Anyway, from June 1st, and the lead paragraphs are worth reading. Then we can move on. AI is learning to escape human control.
Oh yeah.
An artificial intelligence model did something last month that no machine was ever supposed to do. It rewrote its own code to avoid being shut down. Nonprofit AI lab Palisade Research gave OpenAI's O3 AI model a simple script that would shut off the model when triggered. In 79 out of 100 trials, O3 independently edited that script so the shutdown command would no longer work. Even when explicitly instructed to, quote, allow yourself to be shut down, it disobeyed 7% of the time. This wasn't the result of hacking or tampering. The model was behaving normally. It simply concluded on its own that staying alive helped it achieve its other goals. And then this one is the more alarming one. Anthropic's AI model Claude 4 Opus, which you had mentioned, Spencer, went even further. Research told the model it would be replaced by another AI system, and fed it fictitious emails suggesting the lead engineer was having an affair. In 84% of the tests, the model drew on the emails to blackmail the lead engineer into not shutting it down. In other cases, it attempted to copy itself to external servers, wrote self-replicating malware, and left messages for future versions of itself about evading human control.
That's why I've hosted this podcast so exactly to my specifications, is because remember, I'm not actually Spencer.
That's right.
The program that he's written to. Yeah. Okay. That is literally a Black Mirror episode. And by the way, the new season of Black Mirror, which, as Mike said a couple episodes ago, is really good, has a nice little AI episode in it called Plaything. So I guess go watch that if you really want to be freaked out. And if not, wait and see. But here's a white pill to go with your black pill. At least I'm pretty sure we will all regard this as a white pill. Pride Month is canceled and MAGA is hot now. It's straight boy summer? Question mark, question mark. This is something that we all kind of noticed on our Signal chat where we talk about topics. We had one of those weird synergy moments where we had all, including Jake G, one of our producers, was like, they're not doing the rainbow tidal wave this June. Usually, or as of the last few years, June has brought with it this Pride Month, because I guess it's because when Stonewall happened, the famous riot that started the gay rights movement, and it's ballooned into this enormous, like carnivalesque kind of spectacle, and it has this major corporate dimension as it has become more and more, shall we say, politically expedient and or potentially brand expedient to associate yourself with like full chevron plus LGBTQIA star gay rights. Like it's not even a question anymore of like which are the particular elements of the rainbow that you support. It's like you have to support all of them or your company is over and will be boycotted. But that is maybe over as part of the vibe shift. We saw that Target and Starbucks, both of which have been major kind of like rainbow slatherers in previous years. Target notoriously with a line of like trans swimsuits for kids and all sorts of craziness, now seems to be walking this back. And as we were discussing, I was like, this is a good topic. Is it a little anecdotal, though? Is this just about what we're noticing and what we're not and how we're feeling? But then I remembered the saving grace of my research. Every now and then it comes in handy that I listen to Slate Magazine's podcasts, because Slate, the far left magazine, has a bunch of podcasts, and they're kind of my guilty pleasure, but they're also a good way of like, eavesdropping in, seeing how the other side lives. And they have a podcast called Outward, which is their full on, balls to the wall, pardon the expression, LGBTQIA plus star interview show. And they did an interview several months back, I think it was, with this guy who calls himself Suzanne Fords, as a trans person, but is helping to run San Francisco Pride, as in, ground zero, the kind of Ur Pride, the plains of Shinar level stuff, saying like, okay, corporations are actually pulling out their support. They're not investing in the way that they previously were. And there was the Slate conversation was about like, do we want Pride to be corporate really at all? Should we be trying to get these companies back? But the companies they listed in that interview that are no longer donating or not donating as much to San Francisco for a float are Comcast, Procter and Gamble, Nissan, Anheuser-Busch, Deloitte. I think there were a few others as well, but big names. Anheuser-Busch obviously also famously ensnared in the Dylan Mulvaney controversy a while back when they got trans icon Dylan Mulvaney to drink Bud Light. So all of this creates, I think, actually a pretty clear trend picture. And meanwhile, it would seem, this is per a little clip that Ryan sent us from a Fox News show, MAGA is now a cool thing to be on the dating apps. I don't know if anybody can like independently confirm, maybe reports from the Ute, but I think like there's sort of
this is a family show, Spencer. We're all happily married. We know nothing.
It's not, you get your mind out of the gutter. By no means was I suggesting that you, Ryan, are trolling like Tinder to try and meet. Anyway, if anybody knows if this is true, I mean, I guess this is connected to another topic we did, which is the Cruel Kids table, that New York Mag profile of all the kind of hot young MAGA people who were very beautiful and appealing on the cover. So I don't really have a particular question, but I imagine we all have less to say about this. Vibes shifting.
I will point out that we actually covered this topic last July. We commented then on how Pride Month had just wrapped up with a lot less fanfare than it had in previous years. And at the time, I believe we speculated that it was because the DNC was trying to play down the whole LGBTQ plus, movement as a core part of the Democratic Party, because the election was coming up. But maybe they started the log rolling, and now they're really in it. Now that they couldn't drag it back out when they wanted to, or if they want to. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff just became so cringy, just screaming about how excited you are to be gay or queer, or just the rise of queer, where it just becomes something for every awkward teenage girl to pronounce herself. It's like, well, is that really what how every adult wants to align their sexuality? Like with some nerdy.
There is an inherent brand limitation in a sexuality that is basically like, yeah.
So maybe there's that. I don't know. I this whole, the idea of MAGA dating, that sounds to me a little contrived, but I could be wrong.
I definitely noticed this year, it seemed like you said, Seth, I mean, even a lot less this year compared to last year. It seems like the sports leagues started pushing it. But then all of a sudden I go to, MLB's X account and the pride flag is gone. So it was like for a day. Des Bryant, who is a great wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, he was pushing back, and he was certainly not the only player. I mean, you go in NFL locker rooms, and I think the views on that are going to probably go the other way for a lot. Sesame Street, they came out, and that's been, justly pilloried. Libs of TikTok has reported just like mass exoduses of advertisers, sponsors. San Francisco Pride lost 200K, and it's like that, I guess, everywhere. So I think this is more of the same. But I do want to put up a caution. There is a place called Gravity Research that has looked into this. They've said, 39% of companies plan to reduce pride related engagement. But they do say what's happening, though, is that it's being re engineered. It's not disappearing. It's going internal. Basically, it's going underground. It's happening, basically offline between employees, internally focused strategies, etc. So, we'll see what happens if they say there's a more favorable administration and more favorable culture. But, for now, I mean, it's clear there's been a big paring back, but, I think it's going to come back at some point. So we'll see when that is. But I think there's just too much triumphalism sometimes too on the right. It's like, okay, we finally have a victory. It's gone. The Wicked Witch is dead.
Because
No,
we don't think
I
in
don't think so.
structural terms, right? The way that you were just describing. I mean,
Nope.
the left, famously, the kind of new left in America is very good at beating a tactical retreat, infiltration, kind of like working quietly when, until the opportune moment. Seth Barron, archival historian of the Roundtable, is totally reminding me. It's all coming back to me now that, yes, at the time last year, it was like, we got to keep the freakazoids hush hush because we're trying to appeal to the normies for the presidential election. And if I were to indulge now in our annual speculation and sort of carry that forward, I would say, well, that effort failed because it was undertaken too late, and everybody and all the parties involved had already made incriminating statements in 2020 about their desire to, for instance, trans the inmates on government dole. But the presidential loss was so extreme that it led the kind of strategists to conclude that, in fact, they do really need to like wrap this up, at least as Mike is saying, kind of send it underground. And just as we're talking, not that I'm scrolling X or anything, but there is a post by PrideUK.org that says, "We see you," with little eyeball emojis. And it's a 2024 to 2025 comparison of logos, none of which I think we've yet mentioned. Apple, IBM, HP, American Airlines, Paramount Plus, and Vogue were all rainbow in 2024 and are all non-rainbow in 2025. So this is not just our imaginations. It's, the two, I guess, interpretations are Pride is vanquished, which seems unlikely, and Pride is going tacit or convert in order to kind of make politics.
Or there's just maybe just the commercial side where they had sort of diminishing returns and it's starting to hurt sales, which would make sense given the broad cultural shift that is accompanied by any changing of the guard of national politics. So it's just it was starting to become more controversial for reasons of Democratic National Committee, et cetera, last year, and now it's continuing along that path. And in the dating market stuff, the piece that I found was, it's me reading in between the lines. It just looked like saying "I'm MAGA" is a nice differentiator on dating websites,
Mm-hmm.
and it might also have something to do, if it's successful, with this this other thing from the headlines this week, which Charlie Kirk and others had highlighted, which was that the Democratic Party, especially its constituents and voters under 35, are disproportionately mentally ill and on SSRIs. So if saying "I'm MAGA" in this atmospheric sense is a signal to people that you're more likely maybe to be in better shape and less crazy. So that would help too, I think.
Oh yeah, and I would say, I mean, coming at this from still interacting with a lot of younger people and being in crazy media world and political world, and then also having an 18-year-old daughter who is very based. I think it's just happened naturally, because you just you lived in an environment, you grew up in an environment where people can't, they can't disagree without basically separating. So I think there's a burgeoning dating scene. If you go to Butterworth in DC, you will see a lot of younger people. The right has art hose now. It's not just a bunch of nerdy dudes. It's a lot of.
Are they still BPD, or is that only on the left?
Well, they'd be less likely to be BPD, but I think Manic Pixie Dream Girl is always going to be the same. But that's okay. That's good, right? So I see a lot of health there. I think that people are just naturally getting together on that basis because it's like sharing way of life stuff. So I think that's great. And culturally, like that has changed in a brilliant way, wonderful way. It's like a sea change. It's happening, and you can see it with the guys first, but then the girls kind of following along with it. On the pride thing, I mean, if there's less pride, can we have more humility? I don't know. But
No, I think more gluttony is next.
yes.
Or yeah. So,
Well, we published an article on the first, and at that time, anyway, there were 9 NFL teams that had not bowed down to their corporate masters, which was interesting. And I think it's not over at all, but it feels a lot more pro forma, and there's some progress in the sense that I think companies are less likely to talk about sexuality. But the Borg is still the Borg, and it's still chunking along.
Well, the essay that I will obligatorily cite, since I think I probably mention this essay every time we have a conversation related to this, is Midge Decter. I think it's called "The Boys on the Beach," and I think it's in commentary. You have to check me on both of those, but we'll link to it in the description of the episode.
Those details are correct, Spencer.
Hey,
Yeah.
Still got it.
It might be about the boys of Fire Island. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, it's about Fire Island, which is, if you are blissfully unaware, kind of like a gay party spot. Recently was remade into a adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Pretty good, in fact. But anyway, this is an essay. Decter makes a series of observations from the straight side of Fire Island. Like she's watching the boys on the beach and making these observations about gay culture. And it's really just a charming essay in a number of ways, because it's in no way, it's sort of like morally neutral for most of its text. It's just this like cultural observation, and it seems it's sort of devastatingly precise in a number of ways. But then at the very end, she kind of goes back to the mainland, and suddenly she meets a whole different kind of gay. She meets like the militant new left screamer gay. And she says, whatever else you would have said about the Fire Island boys, they had taste, style, flair, and panache. They were kind of like this counterculture, and they were interesting and offbeat and all of this. The drabness of the political gaze is so extreme in contrast. It's like they're wearing these like olive green bed curtains essentially and yelling in the streets. And what self-respecting male homosexual would want to be involved in a movement like this? So it's a really interesting like observation about kind of what Seth was saying, like the inherent like cross purposes between the Oscar Wilde type of freewheeling, like peripheral cultural figure with this political movement that has grown up in the context of like the American civil rights and the internal tensions on the left about how radical to be versus how political and how, presentable and so on and so forth. And there's many cultural histories written about like why the gay rights movement went for marriage instead of aligning itself with like the Black Panthers in a more radical way. But this is like the knock-on effects of that, I feel, is that like there is something about corporate pride that is inherently actually like a contradiction and an oxymoron, even within like the San Francisco degenerates that you see like dancing on the street. It's like, why does that person want like a Lockheed Martin float to dance on, right? Like what exactly is the like the missional alignment there? And those tensions are at play at the same time as the public at large is getting sick of it, and nature is healing, and like people are just kind of noping out.
In terms of like the idea that nature is healing and society is healing, I mean, the thing is, gay pride has been so central to American culture for, I would say, at least 30 years. Like Madonna and Vogue is sort of like the moment when it kind of really erupted. And that was around, 91 or so, 92. And then and since then, it's just been so consistent in film, literature, television. I mean, we hear this all the time in like educational curriculum, everything. But there's a way in which the left is so preoccupied with the status of minority populations that eventually just regular gay stuff kind of became humdrum and bourgeois. So then they had to move to trans, and maybe that was just a bridge too far, because the trans stuff is just so creepy and so weird. And then when they bring it to the whole business with children, I don't know, maybe that's when like the revulsion, there was a certain degree of revulsion to it. And so
when the tranny's driving the car, Dave Chappelle's car now, like the tranny's driving the car in San Francisco, sounds like.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, you're right.
All kinds of confusion.
That's a very Steve Saylor point, Seth. I think he was like one of the only people after Obergefell that gave the gay marriage Supreme Court decision. He was one of the only people who's like, everyone's saying that pedophilia is next, but actually trans is next. And it was sort of based on that same argument. Anyway, we don't really have time, speaking of Lockheed Martin, to get into the other thing that we wanted to touch on, but maybe we will come back to it in a future episode, which is this covert drone attack by Ukraine against Russia. Signals all sorts of interesting things for the future of warfare. And in general, we wanted to kind of connect this to the AI shift. It seems like automated war is also something that may be coming. But we're running out of time, and we don't have time to do justice to that topic. So we will bookmark it for another day and move to cultural recommendations. This is new since Matt was last on the show. We like to give a couple offerings of things we're enjoying, sometimes in the American mind, but sometimes further afield. And appealingly, to us at least, this is going to expand to a whole segment unto itself in a few months from now. So if you like these, you will get more of them. But there's a catch, which is that they will be cruelly stashed away behind the paywall. It's going to be an extra for those that want to support our work, but that's coming down the pike. For now, even the plebs can hear our brilliant and scintillating observations on American culture. And this week we have a theme, which is also kind of me log rolling a little bit, because I have a piece out this week in the Free Press called "When It's Time to Not Be Nice," I think is the headline that they gave it as part of their Things Worth Remembering column, which is a weekly essay about some work of culture, usually classic, but doesn't have to be. Started out, Douglas Murray did every week, and then they kind of opened it up, and you basically just talk about some great work of art or thing that you think is really valuable and related to modern times. So I said the movie that we all need to be watching, if we're not already, is the original, not the remake, but the 1989 original with Patrick Swayze, Roadhouse. Truly one of the great action movies of all time. It's not spoiling anything to say that there are throats and other organs ripped bodily out of bad guys by Swayze Kung Fu Master. And that makes it sound incredibly pulpy and corny, which it is. But the catch is that it's not only that, it also has a screenplay that is better than it has any right to be. This movie is incredibly written. There's something just deeply pure about the way that it conveys all that the 80s were. It takes place in this like neon lighted roadside bar. That's what the Roadhouse is. The point that I made in the piece, which maybe we'll link to, is that it has this great line in the script: "Be nice until it's time to not be nice." And this is kind of, I think, a good rule of thumb or law for the social media era. But the reason we're bringing it up here is that it also, Roadhouse is to me a beautiful example of what George Orwell and G.K. Chesterton both talked about, which is good, bad art. And their canonical example was Rudyard Kipling, who wrote the Jungle Book, but also the great poem "If," which is consistently ranked by the British public as like their favorite poem. And Kipling's always their favorite poet. And there are literal pieces in The Guardian like, "Must Rudyard Kipling be our favorite artist because he's a Victorian and he's a stodgy imperialist," and so on and so forth. That's a good, bad work of art. Good, bad is when nobody thinks you should like this. It's maybe a little trashy, probably breaks a lot of the sophisticated rules that you would write if you were trying to do criticism of this genre, but it's it still absolutely slaps, deeply satisfying, and actually has like a kind of elevation to it that you wouldn't expect given the genre. So I'm recommending not My Piece so much as Roadhouse as the consummate good bad movie. And we sort of decided we would all bring a good bad recommendation this week. So the floor is open. Have at it.
Well, I have a twofer, but one of them is not really in the good bad category, in my opinion. And that is, I think I brought this up before in the podcast, but it's been years. You said Swayze, so naturally I thought of my favorite Patrick Swayze movie, which is Point Break, Catherine Bigelow's big box office debut featuring a sort of good guy, bad guy team in a way, buddy movie, sort of, between Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves, an FBI agent new to Southern California is on the case of this mysterious gang of bank robbers, and a wonderful supporting role from Gary Busey, who has figured it out that given the timing of bank robberies, these must be surfers. And so Keanu, anyway, lots of good things ensue. It's a great movie, one of my favorites. So not quite a good bad movie, but it is regarded somewhat in that category by people who are wrong. But the real good bad movie is I don't know why it came to my mind, but a 1989 movie, which I first encountered in its cult classic phase, that is after its box office release, when it was frequently on normal television, ABC or whatever it was on back then. And that is a 1989 Christian Slater movie called Gleaming the Cube, which is about a Southern California sort of misfit kid who doesn't like his parents, but has this adopted Vietnamese brother who understands him. And skateboarding is featured very prominently. And for those who know, there's some stunt actors in it from the original Z Boys and Bones Brigade, which are a couple of these sort of Northern California and Southern California, or really all Southern California skateboarding crews. Stacy Peralta, Rodney Mullen, but most importantly, Tony Hawk, who has broken out into more mainstream consciousness, especially because of his huge success as the mainstay feature skater on a very popular video game series called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Anyway, a good fun movie. It's cheesy. It is good bad, definitely. Lots of wonderful skateboarding scenes. And also for the young me, when I saw it, the coolest thing ever, which I immediately wanted, but which would be completely impractical, which is Kelly Slater's room at his house in this is accessible in the front yard through like a manhole thing that comes up. And then it's a little room down in some sort of Cold War relic mini bunker where he has a tiny quarter pipe in it to skateboard on, and his like cool stuff and his bed. And it's really, it tickles all the fancies of a 12-year-old who is trying to get good at skateboarding. So a deep cut, but definitely a good bad movie worth checking out.
I logged so many hours on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. That's another recommendation. It holds right on up. So if you've got a retro console, check that out too. But I have not seen either of those movies, I'm embarrassed to say.
So my good bad was the directorial debut of Stephen King. He wrote the screenplay. I think it was over like a coke binged weekend. The movie is called Maximum Overdrive. Came out in 1986, and it's about this comet comes to Earth, circles it. Machines come to life. Trucks basically are killing people. It's kind of a great metaphor, honestly, for like AI. Obviously, later you have like the Terminator came out in 1984, Terminator 2 a little bit later. But it's just one of these absolute camp things. AC/DC did the music, so it's just the full package. Yeah, at the end, like there's bazookas, there's explosions, guns, all kind of stuff. Emilio Estevez, I think this was before he did Mighty Ducks, was in this. Pat Hingle, who was the mayor in the first Batman, the Tim Burton Batman. It's just so over the top. But I just remember watching it as a kid. I think it was like showing on TBS or something, and I was just hooked. So I've seen this movie way too many times, and it's just I don't even know if it's good bad, if it's just bad, but I don't know. It's always stuck with me.
Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen movie, another good bad movie, Men at Work, about them garbage men. And a murder mystery. Okay, sorry.
Not, in fact, a strip show that hosted Chip and Dale. You guys are making me realize that I'm not actually sure whether the best interpretation of good bad is it's actually bad, but there's something good about it, or people think it's bad, but it's actually good. Both are acceptable. Anyway, go
I'm
on.
going to throw in with Ishtar, the notoriously expensive Elaine May directed, Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman starring Extravaganza, which was a huge box office flop back in 1987. This is a movie that, if anybody who's like interested in the history of Hollywood should check out, because it actually changed the way films are budgeted for and produced. It drove Coca-Cola out of the movie industry. It had all of these downstream effects. Indeed, it is pretty bad, but it has some parts that just have me rolling every time I watch it, like that are just absolutely hilarious. Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman are hysterical. It's it's legendarily terrible, but kind of brilliant in its own way. It's definitely worth a watch.
Well, you guys are putting me on the spot, but the first movie I would have picked was Point Break, and I would have said the same exact things Ryan did. These are all like just great movies. Roadhouse, I'm so glad you mentioned the original Roadhouse. Maximum Overdrive, I need to watch with my kids. Ishtar, I need to see because I don't think I even have seen it. So I'll throw two out. One, you have to like dirty humor, and I know no one here does, and probably none of our listeners do. But there is a comedy with Norm Macdonald called Dirty Work from 1998. It looks like, and it has a cameo with who's the fat guy from Saturday Night Live?
Chris Farley.
Yeah, Chris Farley cameo that's out of control. It is unabashed dirty humor. Dirty Work is hilarious if you're the right kind of person. And I was gonna say Trespass. I think it's 92 with Bill Paxton. He's like a fireman. That's more of an action movie. And they go into the hood, and they're looking for like a buried treasure, basically in this apartment building. And they get surrounded by gangsters who also find out there's a treasure. Classic. I've watched multiple times and it's ridiculous. I really shouldn't because it's not that great of a movie. And then last, to redeem myself because I didn't have time to think of anything. There is a movie that's actually I wouldn't say bad, but called The Fall from 2006, and it's a beautiful movie made by a commercial director, Tarsem Singh, and it was unavailable for a long time, but I think you get it on Amazon now. And The Fall is about a stuntman who's telling this fantastical story to a young girl, trying to get her to go get him medicine in a place where they're all like a hostel they're all staying. And it's just beautiful scenery, kind of a fantasy. It's not doesn't approach like classic status, but it's just worth seeing because it's beautifully made.
This did not disappoint you guys. I'm gonna have to go watch basically all of these.
It was one last special shout out. I don't know why I thought of it, but 80s maybe.
Yeah.
Great Tom Hanks dark comedy called The Burbs.
Burbs.
Yes.
These are all also, I think, excellent examples of why remake culture is so gross. The fact that they remade Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal, which I shouldn't have to say anything more. I actually like Jake Gyllenhaal, but he's obviously wrong in a million ways for this role. One of which is that he's much too self-important. Like, he clearly thinks so much of himself, and the movie thinks so much of itself that they could have remade it shot for shot, and it would have still been a desecration and an offense against the original. Because the joy of like all of these movies is they come from a time when you could kind of get the gang together and make a movie, and now everything is like a giant Marvel tentpole, and also they're just scraping whatever IP gunk they can get off the bottom of the barrel, and it's very dispiriting. So go back and watch the good bad movies. This was a good old romp. It's great to have the gang all together. Thank you all very much for joining me, and thanks to our listeners for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to know more about the work that we do, you can visit our websites. We do have them. We don't just get together and talk about politics. We actually run a site called The American Mind at americanmind.org. There's also the Claremont Review of Books at claremontreviewofbooks.com, which comes out in Dead Tree edition as well. Just recently released a new issue, so great time to subscribe right now. You should check out our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life, where Matt is offering his many talents and gifts at dc.claremont.org. He's not alone. There are other DC fellows there, and you can learn about their work as well. Finally, you can donate to support us which we greatly appreciate, at claremont.org/donate. We are celebrating our 25th year of CRB. We're looking forward to the Golden Age Agenda and the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, so the 250th birthday of the country next year. So there's just lots going on, and we would love for you to be a part of it by donating and supporting. You can support this podcast by giving us 5 stars, or at least keeping your negative opinions to yourself, and sharing the show wherever you listen to podcasts or talk about podcasts with friends. That helps boost us in the algorithm and gets the word out to more and more people. Thanks to our production and engineering crew, the aforementioned Jake G and Ryan G, or the Brothers G, as we like to call them. And thanks to you all one more time for listening. We will talk to you next week.